Hello, EnteiTainment here. My name is Daniel, and today we begin our Viability Voyage to the new Sun and Moon Pokemon. Now, as many of you are probably already aware, there are many channels who are devoting their time to looking at the viability of these Pokemon and how they can be used in a competitive way. So, instead of doing that, I'm going to give you guys a slight twist and focus on their viability exclusively in league-based play. Now, I just want to preface this by saying that this is my opinion, and I am by no means a Pokemon master, by no stretch of the imagination. So if you guys want videos that are more about the general competitiveness of these Pokemon, I would highly suggest looking to a different channel, because this is just going to be looking at their viability in league play, or at least trying to focus on it. I mean, I'm going to talk about all their moves, so there's going to be some overlay, but I'm really going to try to focus on league-based play because it'll be something unique that I don't think other channels are really doing, as opposed to the competitive play that many channels are doing much better than I could. So now that that is out of the way, let's hop right into it. You should already know by the thumbnail which Pokemon we're doing today, but in case you are blind, we are doing the 3 fully evolved starters, as well as 2 cannon and gumshoes. So a very fun pilot episode, if I do say so myself. So the first guy is already on your screen. I think it's Decidueye, I believe, because like deciduous and I don't really know. I'm gonna say Decidueye. Regardless, the Ghost Grass type Arrow Quill Pokemon with Overgrow and Long Reach as its hidden ability. Now, Long Reach is kind of interesting. The Pokemon uses its moves without making contact with the target. So, for example, if you were to use a physical move on a Pokemon with rough skin or that had Rocky Helmet, you would not take the recoil damage. So it is definitely interesting, but I think it is very niche, if I can use that word. I don't think you'll find many opportunities to make great use of this. So if the opponent's draft happens to have a ton of rough skin users or a lot of, I don't know, what is it, Poison Point or something, maybe you can use Long Reach, but I think Overgrow, even just having the potential of Overgrow, will be more beneficial to you than having Long Reach. So Long Reach isn't even released yet, I do not think, so we're not going to spend too much time focusing on that, but that's just my 2 cents on the new ability of Long Reach. But getting into his stats, he has a kind of crippling speed down at 70, which is gonna be some starters. I think these are 3 of the slowest starters that Nintendo has ever released in a new generation. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain there have not been a slower trio than these guys. However, he does have a pretty nice attack stat at 107 and a nice special attack stat as well at 100. So not terrible. He's got nice special defense as well, but not fantastic HP and definitely not fantastic defense either. So I do really like the typing of Grass Ghost. Trevenant and Gourgeist were 2 of my most favorite Pokemon to use in League play, and I think that's mainly because of their typing. Now, those 2 Pokemon are very different than this one because they have access to like Leech Seed and like Giga Drain, I guess, which this guy does not, but I think the typing is still really nice. It's great to have a fighting immunity. It's also nice to have a Scald switch in and an Earthquake resist. It's just all great stuff. He is unfortunately weak to fire, which is a pretty prevalent offensive typing, and he is weak to dark, which kind of sucks because a lot of people like to spam knockoff all the time, so not great, but it does have some nice attributes that it can contribute to your draft if you're missing like a Scald switch in or you want a ground resist or something like that. So I would say it has really nice typing and decent stats So with that being said, we're going to go look at the different moves he gets and just focus on a couple, because obviously there's a ton and not most of them are not going to be that viable. So let me get a sip of water really quick. Okay, so first up is actually Spirit Shackle, which is a new move that Decidueye, I think, alone gets. And it deals damage and prevents the target from switching out while you remain in battle. So definitely interesting. However, I think Decidueye will lack the bulk to actually make good use of this move. It could be a way to maybe prevent a wall from switching out. If you are trapping like a bulky psychic type or something, you could potentially make quick use of it, but other than that, I don't think you'll be catching that many things. And something else maybe to think about that could be interesting is Decidueye gets access to Feather Dance, which could work in conjunction with Spirit Shackle. Just thinking like way outside the box, if you happen to catch a physical attacker and Spirit Shackle him in, you could go for Feather Dances a bunch, you could roost off the damage that he does, you could go for Toxic and like whittle him down, but that's your full moveset right there. With Spirit Shackle, Toxic, Roost, and Feather Dance. So very niche, very, very niche. I'm pretty much devoted to stopping physical attackers, but I think it might work. And like I said earlier, you could try to trap a psychic type wall or a ghost type wall. There's not many of those out there, but obviously you can't really trap normal types because they will be immune to your Spirit Shackle. But I think it's a cool move that will give your team a little bit of diversity, mix things up a little bit, and that's going to be a theme for all of Decidueye, like the rest of my analysis, because there's a lot of things this thing can do, but I'm not sure if he's going to be fantastic at any or all of them. So I think Spirit Shackle is definitely interesting, and I appreciate what Nintendo is doing, releasing these new moves and the new abilities and stuff like that. Also, something to think about, this move, Spirit Shackles, does get boosted up into really scary sounding moves if you have the appropriate items. So like a base 180 ghost move sounds horrifying. So there's that to think about as well. And sort of continuing on that theme, he has a lot of utility moves. So we already talked about Feather Dance, we talked about U-Turn, but he also gets, what am I looking for here? He gets Roost, like we talked about. He does get Light Screen, which is interesting. He does get Sucker Punch, I thought was pretty cool. And he also, most importantly, in my opinion, gets Defog and Haze, but mostly Defog. I think Defog is going to really help Decidueye shine in League play, because every draft, in my opinion, should have some form of hazard control. Whether that's a spinner or a defogger, it's pretty important that you at least have one, because generally speaking, hazards are going to be brought to most of your games. And if you don't have a way to handle those hazards, you're going to be in for a pretty rough time. And especially because the opponent will know your draft before the match, he can look at your draft and say, oh, you don't have a defogger or a spinner, and he'll really, really try to abuse that. But if you have a defogger or a spinner, he'll probably still bring hazards anyways. So having a defogger is fantastic, especially on a Pokemon that is not a flying type. That's sort of like the bane of defog. It's a great hazard clearer, but it's mostly found on flying type Pokemon like Zapdos or Mandibuzz, very staple defoggers, but they have to switch into rocks generally, and they lose a quarter of their health when they do so, so it's not great. But Decidueye, despite looking like a flying type, is not. We learned earlier it's a grass ghost type, so it can switch into rocks and not take a quarter of its health, and it can switch into spikes and be at least resistant. I mean, your flying types will be immune to spikes, so they have the upper hand there, but generally speaking, I think rocks are much, much, much more common than spikes or toxic spikes, so I think having a defogger who is not a flying type could be really, really, really helpful. So that is another great thing about Decidueye. And finally, he has, well, ghost typing. I just love ghost types. Ghost is really nice offensively. It's only resisted by normal, obviously, and dark, which are, dark types are not that common, especially not really bulky dark types. So I really like ghost type, and he does get Nasty Plot as well as Shadow Ball, or Swords Dance as well as Shadow Claw. So he has the corresponding special and physical moves to both of these pretty OP boosting moves. So I think this thing could be great. Also, he does get Energy Ball and Leaf Blade, so it's not like he only has psychic moves. He does not have great coverage. He has Acrobatics and Steel Wing on the physical side, maybe Low Sweep, but on the special side, there's not a whole lot to work with besides Energy Ball and Shadow Ball, maybe Grass Knot. He doesn't get Giga Drain, I don't think, which really, really sucks. I think you would love to have Giga Drain on a slower Pokemon like this. You could make some sort of bulky sweeper with Nasty Plot. I think that'd be really, really cool. But unfortunately, he does not have Giga Drain, so that is very, very sad. He does get Curse, which, as you know, with ghost types works a little differently. They like sacrifice their health and lay a curse on the opposing Pokemon. So another interesting utility move, but I don't think that will be one you want to be using a lot, especially because he doesn't get a Giga Drain or Leech Seed like Gorgeist or Trevenant, who can really make use of Curse. He does get Roost, or I guess Synthesis if you want to be weird, but he does not get those offensive moves that restore health. And finally, he gets Baton Pass, which could be interesting since he does have Nasty Plot and Swords Dance. So stuff to think about. I would say overall, Decidueye can do a lot of different things, but I don't think it can do any of them particularly well. I don't think he'll be the best at something, if that makes sense. He can just bring diversity to your team, which, since we're talking about league-based play, is actually really, really important in my opinion. If I digress slightly, when I had Infernape back in season whatever, Infernape is terrifying because of its diversity. I mean, it can be physical, it can be special, it can boost, it can be a suicide lead, it can be banded, it can be scarfed, it can be specs, it can U-turn, set up rocks. I mean, Will-O-Wisp, bulk up, it can Calm Mind. Like, there's 19 sets that you can run with Infernape, and I think Decidueye will be sort of similar to that, but he will not by any means have the same offensive prowess. He'll be unique in terms of how many different things it can do with its utility. I mean, we were talking about the Spirit Shackles earlier. It has Sucker Punch, it has Feather Dance, we were talking about Baton Pass, it could be a Curse set, it can U-turn. There's a lot of weird utility things it can do. It just won't be like an offensive monster like Infernape because of its diversity. It'll be a weird sort of niche tech defensive mon because of its diversity. So definitely cool. I'm actually really excited. The thing that really set off my excitement with this guy was Defog, actually, because I'm always looking for a hazard clear that isn't weak to rock, so that's why I usually rely on spinners. But I think this thing could be a really nice defogger, especially since, generally speaking, rock setters will tend to be rock types or ground types, and obviously Decidueye will probably be able to hit those super effectively with a grass type move. So that's a very, very, very general statement. I know there's a ton of Pokemon that are not rock or ground types that can set up hazards. I mean, I was just talking about one in Infernape, but very, very generally, I think you will find use in having a grass type defogger just because most hazard setters are rock or ground types. So that is everything on Decidueye. I really like it, but I don't think it is fantastic. I think it might be a little too niche, and like I was saying earlier, it's not going to be in my opinion. It's not going to be stupendous at one thing or even several things. It's just going to be that weird, like, random ace in the hole that reveals like 2 boosting moves and baton passes into whatever. Like, that could be crazy, but other than that, I don't think it is that powerful. So next up is Incineroar, the heal Pokemon, a fire dark type with Blaze and the hidden ability Intimidate. So unlike Decidueye, Incineroar has a ability we've already seen, but also unlike Decidueye, this ability is actually fantastic. So it is unreleased, but I think if it ends up getting released, which I believe it will at some point, right? You'll just make the switch. Like, I don't think there's any reason to have Blaze over Intimidate. I can't really think of one reason, like, unless you're running like Focus Sash Sweeper or something. But looking at his stats, I'll talk about why you probably cannot run a Focus Sash Sweeper, and it's mainly because he has this base 60 speed that he can't really do anything with. That's pretty awful. To sort of counter that, he has decent overall bulk, and he does have a nice attack stat of base 115. Now, something to remember is that Incineroar does not have access to knockoff, which, when I heard there was going to be a powerful dark type starter, I thought, oh god, the last thing we need is another insane knockoff user. But he doesn't get it. Instead, he gets a couple new moves, the first of which is Throat Chop, which deals damage obviously and prevents the target from using sound-based moves for 2 turns. Now, this, again, is very niche. However, I think it could provide some clutch last-minute Throat Chop that expiled before it sweeps your whole team kind of situation. So, I don't think it's great, just because it isn't, like, Scald is great, right? Because it can burn, and you always want burn. It's never not beneficial to have the chance to burn, but it can be not beneficial. Say if you're throat chopping, I don't know, Infernape. Infernape is never going to use like Boom Burst or anything like that, so it's not great, and I don't think there's enough sound-based moves in the meta anyways to really make this move useful. Like, if every Pokemon and its mother got Boom Burst and was using it in OU, then okay, maybe. But since that's not the case, I don't think Throat Chop is that great, and will probably be outshone by the other move, Darkest Lariat, which we'll look at in a second. But something else to think about is this move will get powered up by Darkinium Z and turn into Throat Chop, or turn into Black Hole Eclipse, which sounds horrifying. All these moves that get powered up sound absolutely terrifying. But now we're going to look at Darkest Lariat, which is base 85 as opposed to base 80 with Throat Chop, and it deals damage but ignores changes to target stats. Now, I think we have seen moves like this before. As I get a sip of water, trying to remember them. I don't remember them, but I'm pretty sure we have a move like this somewhere else. And I just personally, it's higher power than Throat Chop, and I think it will be more beneficial. I think more Pokemon get defense boosting moves than they get sound-based moves. I think I can make that statement safely. Like, a lot of stuff gets bulk up. A lot of stuff gets, I guess not a lot of stuff gets Iron Defense. I don't know. I think these 2 moves are sort of equally useless, based on the effect, but I would prefer to ignore stat changes than prevent them from using sound-based moves. So the effects, both of them, are very niche, but I think generally I would prefer this one, and it's higher base damage, and it can get powered up into 2 different moves, the Black Hole Eclipse or the Malicious Moonsault. Jeez, it's such a powerful name. Like, how are you gonna, nothing takes a Malicious Moonsault. This is like a typo. This is supposed to be base like 1,800. Do you hear the name of this thing? Malicious Moonsault? Are you kidding me? That's insane. Anyways, those are the two, I guess, substitutes to knockoff, which neither of them are better than knockoff, because again, like what I was talking about, it's never a bad thing to knock someone's item off, but it can be a bad thing to hit a non-boosted Pokemon with Darkest Lariat. Like, you're not getting any special benefit. But the nice thing about these moves is the power will not drop off if they don't have an item, which is obviously the case with knockoff. If the Pokemon does not have an item, your base power drops down to like 65, I think. I gotta get another sip of water, I'm sorry. Whew, I don't know what's going on today, but getting right into it, this thing as well gets Nasty Plot and Swords Dance, like our boy Decidueye. Again, like our boy Decidueye, not fantastic coverage. He does get Flare Blitz and Flamethrower, which are like the staple fire-type moves. He gets Brick Break as well as Earthquake, which is nice. He gets Will-O-Wisp, which I think is interesting at least. He also gets U-Turn, but again, I don't think he's fast enough or bulky enough to really make utility of this. He gets Substitute, which would be cool. And something I want to point out as well is he gets Bulk Up, which I think would be really, really cool on a Pokemon such as this. He has mediocre defenses that once you start buffing them up can really get out of control, and obviously his attacks that will really get out of control if he starts boosting that as well. So he gets Substitute, he gets Bulk Up. Unfortunately, he doesn't get Drain Punch. Oh my god, if this thing got Drain Punch, oh, it'd be out of control, but sadly no, he does not. So I think that could be a viable set. Another maybe interesting set you could try with Incineroar would be something with Flame Charge. Now, speed works a little differently in League play than it does in, say, the OU tier. Like, in the OU tier, you can expect to see a lot of things at or around base 100 speed, I think it's fair to say. But in League play, you're seeing stuff from a bunch of different tiers, and that means that the average, like the overall average of the speed stats of that draft is going to be probably, in like every case, way, way, way below 100. So if you could even get one Flame Charge off, even though his base speed is only 60, he could be already outspeeding a lot of stuff. And if you somehow get two, that could be a sweep right there. His attack stat does not really need to be buffed, especially if you manage to get chip damage on a lot of members of the team. So if you had like Flame Charge, Darkest Lariat, or Throat Chop, if you wanted that, you could run Earthquake and like Flare Blitz. Does he get a non-recoil physical fire move? Like Fire Punch, maybe? He gets Fire Fang. So, I don't know. I think you could try to make it work. If an Incineroar sweep is something on your agenda, I would definitely look to Flame Charge, because you can boost your speed and maybe get out of control. So something definitely to think about. Just some more random coverage. He does get Will-O-Wisp, which is obviously great. He gets Fake Out, which is interesting, I would say. He sort of reminds me of, a little bit, some of these moves kind of remind me of Infernape, honestly, because of the Will-O-Wisp and the Fake Out and the U-Turn and the variety of boosting moves. He gets Nasty Plot and Swords Dance, as well as Bulk Up. So there is some semblance to Infernape, but this thing does not have nearly the diversity of Infernape or even Decidueye. I don't know why I keep bringing up Infernape, but I do. Brutal Swing, I don't actually know what this is. Oh, damages everything. Okay, so that's not really going to be used that much. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say really about Incineroar. He does get Dark Pulse if you want to go special. It's not like he only has physical moves. But yeah, I think that is about it for this guy. I'm not that excited for Incineroar. I don't think he's... How do I phrase this? Obviously, he's not fast enough, in my opinion. Even with Flame Charge, I mean, you need to spend a turn boosting, and if you haven't gotten chip damage on the on the enemy team, he's going to have a hard time sweeping, I think, because 115 is good, but if you're not boosting your attack, it's going to definitely be hard for you to actually make that work. And he just doesn't seem that complex to me, personally. Like, Decidueye was great. I'm really excited for Decidueye because of all the weird things he can do, but Incineroar, it feels like he's either going to be some kind of like slow wall breaker, or he's going to be some weird like Will-O-Wisper with I don't know, maybe a bulk up user, something weird. Like, I don't think there's that much you can do with him, and he doesn't get knockoff, which is really, really detrimental, I would say, to something like this. He would really benefit from having knockoff, but sadly not. And the coverage is there, it's just not great. It's kind of spotty, and I think coverage is really important in league-based play, because if you can predict correctly and the opponent is not expecting it for whatever reason, you can really steamroll a team with the right coverage moves. So overall, Incineroar, I would say not great. I would rank him under Decidueye, actually, just because of he feels a little two-dimensional personally, and he doesn't feel fast enough to actually be able to get the job done. So those are my thoughts. On to Primarina, the soloist Pokemon, who is a water fairy type with Torrent and Liquid Voice. Now, Liquid Voice we also have not seen. It turns sound-based moves into water type moves. So, unlike Incineroar, it has a new ability, and unlike Decidueye, it has a useful ability. So it's like we got the trio here. We got Decidueye with a new ability that was useless. We got Incineroar with an old ability that's really good, and Primarina with a new ability that's also really good. So fantastic. Well done, Primarina, yeah. So looking at the stats once again, a base 60 speed. Now, can I please just talk about something for a sec? This thing has no feet, right? And it's faster than a cat that's on fire. Is that what you're telling me? Is that what you're telling me? What is your speed? Still only 90. I don't know, dude. Something is very wrong here, though. Like, there's no reason for a seal to have the same speed as a cat. I'm very sad. If this thing was fast, oh my god, this thing could be crazy, but it's not, and it makes me very sad. But anyways, it is now time for Primarina, who has really nice special attack, as well as really nice special defense, and since this thing is more bulky anyways, I'm not too worried about its base 60 speed. I'm just pissed that it's the same speed as a cat. But moving on. Did I talk about what this does? Yeah, it turns sound-based moves into water-type moves. So it would make Hyper Voice, for example, stab, because it'll be a water-type move, which I think is really cool. I believe it's slightly nerfed. Like, Aerialate turned them into flying-type moves and also provided a, like, 1.3 times buff or something obscene. So it was like stab and then some. But for Liquid Voice, it'll just be stab, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong down in the comment section. You'll also get that stab sing, which I know we're all looking for. But overall, it has pretty decent coverage, I would say. Water types tend to have decent coverage, in my opinion. Like, if you look at Milotic, it has really nice coverage. So similar to Milotic, this thing has Ice Beam, it has Shadow Ball, it has Psychic. Does it have Psychic? Yeah, it has Psychic, it has Energy Ball, it also has Scald, which is fantastic, and its new move is Sparkling Aria, which deals damage, and if the target is burned, heals it. So, pretty useless, but if you want to get the power spike, the power on this thing actually spikes higher than, like, Malicious Moon or whatever that was. So that's interesting. I think that was base 180. And this is up at base 195, so if you are willing to maybe heal your opponent, you could get some crazy damage off. Overall, this guy just seemed like another Milotic with fairy typing. There's not there's honestly doesn't feel like there's a whole lot I can really say about this. I really like the coverage. It does get Perish Song, which could be cool. Is this a new move as well, Aromatic Mist? To raise its Spadef, but it'll be its teammates. So maybe in like triples or something, this could be an interesting Pokemon. But since we're talking about League 1v1s, I'm not going to focus too much on that. Just nice coverage, pretty much the nicest coverage I've seen so far in any of these starters with all the diversity in here. Obviously, it gets really powerful moves like Hydro Pump. It does not get Moonblast, which is unfortunate. Oh, it does, okay. It does get Moonblast, so really nice dual stab coming off a pretty high special attack stat. Maybe this will be an interesting, like, slow specs user or something, some kind of wall breaker. This guy feels even more two-dimensional than Incineroar. I think you can pretty much only go, like, slow offense with this thing. Obviously, you can't go physical, and I don't think you can really sweep with this. It has no way to buff its speed as far as I can tell, and it just has nice power coming off a really great special attack stat, but of course its speed will not be fantastic. So this is probably going to be the shortest analysis of the starters, but there's really not a whole lot I feel I can say. It's just another bulky water type, which is like the last thing I wanted to see, but I already don't feel like dealing with Milotic and Suicune and Vaporeon. Like, why is there another one? But at least it has a nice special attack stat, so maybe people will not run like Toxic and just stall you out. It does not get Recover, it looks like. It gets Aqua Ring or something. Yeah, it doesn't get Recover, it doesn't get Wish, so that's nice at least. So maybe I retract that. You know what, Primarina, I retract that. You're not going to be Stally. You don't have the balls to be Stally. You're just going to be some casual bro who switches in and deals 3 bajillion damage with a Hydro Pump, if you connect. But yeah, Scald is obviously fantastic. It does not have recovery, so it might be hard to use stuff like Amnesia or any other boosting moves. I don't really see one. It does get Substitute. It has Psych Up, which is strange. It does get Aqua Jet, so there's some priority, but not really much priority that you will be using in all likeliness. It gets Dual Screens, which is pretty cool, but overall, how would I rank you? I think I'm going to put you actually above Incineroar, honestly. So it's going to be Decidueye, Primarina, Incineroar in terms of most viable to least viable, in my humble opinion, just pretty much because of the coverage. You can run offensive with an offensive Primarina and do really nice damage, it looks like. But it's not going to be above Decidueye because it doesn't look like you're going to have a very easy time running a bulky, like, Stally Primarina. It's going to switch in a couple times and really only to special moves. Like, it does not have great defense. So if you're trying to run a defensive set, you're doing it wrong because you should be running Milotic. But if you're running like something offensive with really cool coverage, then I could see this thing being useful. So Incineroar, maybe I'm being too harsh on Incineroar, but the speed is not there, and it just seems lackluster, honestly, to me. And it's weak to ground and fighting and water, which are all terrible things to be weak to, so I don't know. But Primarina, I would say, pretty nice. He's 5'11", this guy's 5'11", this guy's 5'3". Ah, you ruined it. Anyways, moving on to our first non-starter, Toucannon. Now, Toucannon is another normal flying type, which we seem to get a ton of all the time, but it does get some cool abilities, not really in Keen Eye, but in Skill Link and potentially Sheer Force. Now, I'm not sure if this thing gets many moves that would benefit from Sheer Force, but it does get moves that benefit from Skill Link. So before we look at that, we're going to look at the stats. He is 120 attack, which is actually higher than Incineroar, and again down at 60 speed. So I don't know what is going on with this generation, but everything just seems really slow with like high attack or special attack. So that's interesting. But he does get freaking skill link along with Bullet Seed or Rock Blast or Fury Attack. So Fury Attack is actually stab, so that's really cool. And its new move is Beak Blast, which is a charging. The user first heats up its beak and then attacks the target. Making direct. So I think this happens in one turn. I think you heat up your beak. Yeah, it's -3 priority. So you heat up your beak, your opponent moves, and then you unleash the Fury on the same turn, I think. Maybe. And it's base 100, which is really powerful. And it can burn the target. And we all know that burn moves are insane, looking at you, Scald. So this actually is pretty cool, I would say. Beak Blast is interesting. If this was a 2-turn move, I would not suggest it, but if I'm interpreting this correctly, I think it's 1 turn. And it gets powered up into Supersonic Sky Strike. Come on, these names are insane. But I think that move is pretty cool, and along with the utility of Skill Link, this thing could make an interesting attacker. Obviously, he's very slow and does not get ways to boost his speed unless you want to go the Flame Charge route, similar to Incineroar. However, Flame Charge will not be stab, so you're basically only using it to get your speed buff. Since it won't even hit anything you couldn't hit anyways, like it, or I guess steel types, okay, fine. But you can already hit grass types, you can already hit bug types, so Flame Charge is going to be pretty much useless except for boosting your speed. So it would not work that great with Beak Blast because you're sort of stalling yourself with Beak Blast, and doesn't matter if you're faster, you have -3 priority, so it depends on what you're looking for. If you want a skill link sweeper like Cloyster or something, if you want like a a bird version of Cloyster, then you could try running Flame Charge, but I don't know how well that will work. Having the stab Fury Attack is obviously really nice, and it's not great coverage with Bullet Seed and Rock Blast. You're gonna struggle with steel types mainly, as well as like, I don't know, maybe like bulky flying types. It's gonna be hard. I know he has Rock Blast, but like, I don't know. I don't know personally if this thing will be good or not. I don't think you could really run anything that bulky, just because like flying normal doesn't. It only has 3 weaknesses, so it's nice, but it doesn't have many resistances either. So it's gonna be hard to actually be taking hits with 2 cannon. He does get Swords Dance, which is cool, and U-turn as well, but similar to Decidueye, I don't think U-turn is going to be that useful on such a slow, non-bulky Pokemon. You could go for some special stuff if you're going Boom Burst and Flash Cannon. I don't think he gets a special flying move though, which is very sad. But not much to say about 2 cannon. I don't think it'll just be a nice attacker. If your team is lacking like physical prowess and you're okay with drafting a semi-slow Pokemon, this thing could fill the role pretty well, especially because it can hit multiple times and it's guaranteed to hit all 5 of those times with Skill Link. So if you happen to get a Swords Dance off and you are faster than everything by some miracle, you could maybe get some sweeping done if there's no steel types left. So an interesting mon. Beak Blast is great utility in my opinion. He will need to survive a hit though, which could be rough. If you can force a switch, that'll be great because it's like a guaranteed burn on the switch-in. But other than that, I think it will be hard. And honestly, I could be reading this wrong. It could be the user first heats up its beak and then it attacks them. I honestly can't tell if this is 2-turn or not. I really can't. Please let me know in the comments. If this is 2-turn, then you can like disregard everything I said. But if it's 1-turn, that could be pretty crazy. So anyways, he does get weird tech stuff like Sunny Day or Feather Dance. Just stuff to like annoy the team, but nothing insane. The coverage is not really there, in my opinion. Having like Steel Wing, like he doesn't have anything to hit steel types aside from Rock Smash, and no one's gonna run Rock Smash, and Flame Charge, which is very, very weak. So if you were willing to sacrifice a move slot for like Overheat, then maybe you could make that work. But if he got like a ground move, maybe, or something like that, this thing could definitely get work done if it was fast enough. But I'm gonna go with what I said earlier. It's just a good like slow attacker, a potential wall breaker, and it can disperse burns through the enemy team, which is always nice. So I would say this thing is decent. I'm not gonna put him on the same scale as the starters because that feels pretty unfair since his stat total is very low, but definitely decent. And finally is my boy Gumshoes with pretty much the expected stats you would likely see on a normal type down here, but up here he's got that 110 attack as well as the hidden ability Adaptability, which is crazy. Now obviously on a Pokemon with Adaptability would like to have 2 types because then it gets the additional stab bonus to 2 different typings, but sadly Gumshoes is only a normal type. But that does not mean you should be upset because he obviously gets a lot of normal type moves, such as Hyper Fang or Takedown or Thrash, like an Adaptability Thrash. Think about that. It's like an Adaptability Outrage coming from a Dragon type, except now it's an Adaptability Thrash coming from a normal type. Like, that could be crazy. Now, normal is not great offensively since it doesn't hit anything super effectively, but that's not even that true because not much resists it. It's like rock and steel and ghost, so there's not a lot of ghost types, so you don't gotta worry about that too much. But if you can get rid of like rock and steel types and you can get these thrashes going, you could deal some disgusting damage, but obviously you're not very fast, so that's just going to keep coming up, it feels like. I know this is only the first 5, but none of these Pokemon are fast enough to utilize these insane moves. Like, think about that. Thrash, Adaptability. What if you put like Band on this thing? That would reach astronomical levels of damage, but your base like 45 speed. Yeah, like what are you going to do with that? You can't do anything with that. So since you can't comfortably run offense, I'm going to look at some of its other things. It does get Super Fang, which is a pretty nice tech move. If you don't know, it takes off half of the opponent's HP, so you can't kill with this, but ideally you're hitting a bulky Pokemon with full health and taking off half of its HP, which is great, especially if the Pokemon you're hitting does not have recovery. It's really, really, really fantastic. It does get actually okay coverage. It gets Rock Tomb. Doesn't get Stone Edge, sadly, but it gets Rock Tomb, gets Bulldoze, but it gets Earthquake as well. It gets Crunch, I think. Yeah, it gets Crunch, so interesting coverage. Oh, it gets U-Turn as well. Apparently everything gets U-Turn in this as well. It has access to Last Resort, which could be crazy with Adaptability. It's even more powerful than Thrash. But, I mean, obviously, it's not great. Like, it's a normal type with base 45 speed. If you can scare something out and get a hit off, it'll do a lot of damage, but, like, I don't think you're going to want to switch into this thing, so it is probably going to be like a one-hit wonder. It's going to be too slow to actually stay around for long enough, but it's going to deal damage like one thing. So if you need a Pokemon who can deliver on one turn and you want to go for like Last Resort or Thrash or even Super Fang, then maybe this thing will work for you. But the coverage is decent, not great. It only has like 3 typings, so definitely not fantastic. It has enough coverage to potentially fill a moveset, but they're gonna know what your moves are. You can't really hide anything. It gets Pursued, which I guess could be interesting. It gets Sand Attack if you want to be annoying, but I don't really see it happening for this Gumshoes. He's just too slow. He has this crazy attack stat and a really cool ability, and then they just ruin it with base 45 speed. So, not great. I don't think this thing is great. I would not really look to this guy unless you are building like a sticky web team and you're running scarfed Gumshoes. Then maybe, maybe it'll work for you. But other than that, definitely would not rate this thing very highly. I would put him well beneath Toucannon, I think. And even Toucannon suffers from the speed problem, as do all of these Pokemon, interestingly enough. So hopefully we get some speedy Pokemon coming up in the next episode. I don't even know what it's going to be because I have not seen anything about this game, essentially. This is all brand new stuff to me as well. Like, when I prepare for these videos, that's the first time I'm seeing these Pokemon. So that is going to do it. I'm going to end the episode there. If you want to leave any comments below, disagreeing with anything I say, please do not be shy. I will be happy to have a discussion with any and all of you who leave comments down below. I really love hearing from you guys, and I want your ideas to be expressed. So if any of you have a question or a concern and you want to comment it down below, please feel free, and I am sure I will respond to you as quickly as I can. And if it happens to be a particularly great question, or if you bring up a really good point, I could even make a video on it. So if you want to see your ideas featured in the video on this channel, please do not be shy and go ahead and start a discussion down in the comment section, and I will be more than happy to acknowledge your existence. Anyways, I think that is it from me. Very excited to get on with the series. You can let me know what you guys think. If you're digging it, please tell me. If you're not, also please tell me. Just let me know why. And I feel like I was a little sloppy this episode, so I hope to step up my game in the future. I was slightly underprepared, I guess, so I'm going to work a little harder next time around. So thank you for sticking with me if you made it all the way through this episode. Regardless, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have an excellent rest of your day. This has been Daniel and EnteiTainment.